Hey everybody, it's Austin Solomon, the Solomon Group Coldwell Banker. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Wausau Real Estate Show. Today we're talking about thinking of selling, but you got water in your basement. What do you do? So if you've been around central Wisconsin in the spring of 2019, you know that water in basements was a common occurrence for a lot of people. And a lot of those people have never had water in their basement before, but just a crazy spring led to water in the basement. So if you're thinking about selling, that's something that probably is in the back of your mind. Hey, I did have water in my basement in the spring of 2019. What am I going to do? How do I address that issue? That's what we're talking about today. Let's back up just a little bit. When you sell a home, one of the processes and one of the things you have to do is fill out a real estate condition report. And what this is, it's your best knowledge of the condition of the house. And so it's like a 6-page report, and you fill it out to the best of your knowledge, and it basically covers all the classifications and the categories of a house. So are you aware of defects in the roof? Yes or no, etc. One of those boxes is, are you aware of like leaks in the basement, etc. To which, if you had a leak, you'd probably check yes, or you should. That would be the honest thing to do. So obviously, when you put your house up for sale, the buyer, when they make an offer on the home, they're going to see that condition report, or even when they're viewing the home, that's something that is valuable to see. And if you just check that, you check that box and you disclose it, obviously that's going to be a concern to a buyer. And that's honest. That's what you have to do. You have to be honest, throughout the process. The question is there a way that, can you be proactive about that? Like if you're thinking about selling your house in a year or two and you had water in the basement, what kind of steps should you take now in order to alleviate that problem or make it less of a problem? So that's what we're talking about today. Because again, when I'm showing houses and that comes up on the condition report, and it certainly does quite often, a lot of times the first thing the buyer says is, well, how bad was it? How much water, was there? Will it happen again? Was it fixed? What caused it? Is there any mold? And so those are a lot of questions that a buyer would think. And there's a certain approach that I want to share today that is basically is a way to eliminate the buyer concerns as much as you can. So here's the approach. If you had water in your basement, you're thinking about selling, the best thing to do is to get a licensed professional in there right away to come and take a look at it. And they're basically going to come out, they're going to look at the problem and probably have a decent idea of what's going on. So this would be like a mason or foundation specialist. If you have a stone foundation, block, etc., it might change, slightly, but a lot of times they're going to come out, they're going to look at what's going on, and then they're going to give you a assessment. Like, hey, here's probably what's causing water in the basement, right? And in the spring of 2019, again, I'm not any sort of professional, but this has came up so many times, and I've probably been to a dozen inspections like this. And in the spring of 2019, what happened is everything thawed out so fast, and there was just standing water everywhere. And if there wasn't proper grading around a house, if the grading was slanted towards the home, obviously water is going to, follow the slant and the grade and follow the rules of gravity. And if it was ponding around the foundation of a house or ponding around a window in your basement, eventually the water would find a way in. And this spring, it just did that. This spring was just a lot of melting, and the ground was still frozen, and a lot of water got in people's basements. So, and again, when you have that person come out, they're going to be able to tell you, here's kind of what I think the problem is, and here's how we fix it. So maybe it's a leak from a window. Maybe it's because of a lack of gutters. Maybe it's the grading. Maybe it's a downspout that just is missing and fell off. Maybe it's a sump pump issue. So all those things could be the problem. The key is, if you have a professional come out there and document, hey, here's the things that I would suggest you do to prevent that from happening, then obviously you have a good idea of what's going on. Now, some of those issues you might be able to address on your own. Maybe if it's something like grading, that's something that you could do on your own, like adjusting, bringing in fill, making sure everything slants away for the house. Maybe you have gutters installed. The key is when you have a problem, you want to have a professional come out, evaluate it, and say, hey, here's the steps that we have to take to prevent this from happening. And if a buyer sees that, hey, they had water come in their basement in 2019, they had a professional come out, the professional recommended these things, and they did it, obviously that is taking care of that concern in a much more, in a much better way, and can handle that with a buyer. Also, the other thing is if you're not selling your house for a year or two out, and you're able to have some time in between when it occurred, some time where like a year or two where that issue didn't come up because of the fixes that were made and it hasn't happened since, that's another huge thing that will put a buyer at ease, knowing that it was fixed and it hasn't happened since. And this approach really can be used for a lot of issues that come up, whether you have a leak that happened from an ice dam or around a chimney, or any issue that comes up in your house. And again, if you're thinking about selling it, probably the approach to use would be to document, hey, what's the problem? And then obviously get that fixed. And it's nice to know from the buyer's perspective that, hey, they had it addressed by a professional, or at least the professional addressed the problem, and they took the necessary fixes to make it proper. So again, there you go. If you had water in your basement in 2019 or in years past, it's not the end of the world. The key is you got to be honest. And like I say, it's a good idea to have someone come out, assess the situation, make recommendations, and then work to get those recommendations taken care of so that a buyer can feel comfortable about moving forward with that condition. So thanks for tuning into this week's episode of the show, and we'll catch you on the next one.